Welcome, friends, to another episode of LSR Live. I'm Scott Ritsema, your host, and we've got a guest you've seen before. One of my favorite guests happens to be a very close personal friend of mine, C.H.E.A.P. Kruezer. I'll tell you more about him in just a second. But Jeremy always puts this little code up on the screen, this QR code. And I wanted to give you guys the URL this time, livingspringsretreat.com/shop. Not everybody uses the QR code, but he's always got it saying there, you have a scratchy throat for the Remedies. Well, I was reading through you guys' testimonials, and one of you actually said that very thing. You said, when my throat starts feeling scratchy, a couple of sprays is very soothing and pleasant to use. Now, we pre-recorded a guest that's coming up in LSR Live a few weeks from now, end of the month of April, Dr. James Markham. And this was just a few days ago. I literally actually had the scratchy throat thing going on. It had gone through the family, and it was now my turn to fight it off, and it never really took hold. I sprayed. It helps. Remedies is my go-to throat spray, one of you guys said, when I sing or speak, or I've been around someone who is sick. I also use it when the indoor air is dry. It is soothing. That's a different perspective on Remedies throat spray. Don't forget also about the nasal spray. I'm not reading testimonials on that, but shake that one. That iodine and the good stuff in there is really good for during the viruses. Because of these products, one of you said, I have stayed healthy for several years. Now, I want to give glory to God and his 8 laws of health, because if you've been staying healthy for 8 years, this probably has more to do with a whole lot better living than just these sprays. But as a senior, this is life enhancing, one of you said. And last one, Remedies is amazing. If I feel a sore throat coming on, I take it right away. And then I won't read the rest because it sounds like a health claim. We do not intend to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent anything. I also recommend it for traveling or when you are in large crowds of people. It's a great preventatively as well as when you're not feeling your best. Amazing product. Thank you. You're welcome. It's our delight. Head over to the LSR store, livingspringsretreat.com/shop. Now, our guest, C.H.E.A.P. Kruezer, is talking about natural remedies during the Q&A particularly. But as we were discussing before the program, something that we've not dealt with on LSR Live is mold issues. We're going to be talking mold, and then during Q&A, bring your mold questions, but also your natural remedies questions on anything. We'll see if we have God's answers from natural health methods. Here's C.H.E.A.P. Kruezer, a speaker passionate about natural health, plant-based living, and simple remedies. Through faith-based and practical insights, C.H.E.A.P. inspires others to embrace a holistic lifestyle for lasting wellness and vitality. Jeremy, let's bring C.H.E.A.P. up and welcome him to the program, and welcome all our listeners all over the world. We'll talk to you guys. Load up your questions in the Q&A. We'll give you your shout-outs. Let us know where you're watching from. But C.H.E.A.P, you're in Ohio at the moment because you're starting in a little something new that I hope we have you back on to announce a little more formally. But do you want to tell us a little bit about the latest in your health ministry journey?
Sure. I am presently in Ohio, roughly 60 miles east of Columbus, and I'm in the midst of the second largest Amish community in the world, at least in the United States, and I think in the world. And we are starting a health center, a lifestyle center here in a little area called Nellie. Nobody's ever heard of Nellie, but it's actually called Mohawk Village is right here, but nobody's ever heard of that either because it's very, very tiny. But it's a beautiful location, hilly area, and we have the facility. We have a beautiful 90-acre property here with a large house, and we are now in the process of furnishing the facility here to be able to start a lifestyle center where people can come temporarily and change their lifestyle and hopefully find a healthier, happier life.
Oh, praise God. I love hearing that because there are so many problems with big pharma and, the whole system. And you've got just humble people and places rising up to meet the needs of those who are really struggling. And one of the things many of us are struggling with and might not even know it because it's not talked about that much is mold. And I know that's something you've personally encountered and been afflicted with and have had to learn a lot about it through that process. And I know for our listeners who aren't, acquainted with C.H.E.A.P, Chad is a committed researcher. I mean, he does his homework like hardly anybody else I know, and really dug into this mold topic, dove deep, and has some information for us today about mold exposure, how it affects us, how we might mitigate it, and then also what can we do if we've been exposed. So, Chad, take us into the mold topic, and we can chat a little bit. But I want to give you the floor to really get your message across.
Well, one of the things just right up front, and it was stated at the beginning, but I have a bias, and everybody actually does have a bias. And if you don't think you have a bias, I think you're probably the most biased. But my bias is that I believe in the Word of God. I believe in the Bible as the foundation of life, spirituality, happiness, eternal life, and truth, even the basis of scientific reasoning. And the Bible talks about, it's fascinating that you go back to toward the beginning in the Pentateuch, you have the Bible talking about, it actually devotes quite a bit to the issue of mold, fascinatingly. And that tells me it is a real issue right there. They noticed it. There was an issue. It even talked about one of the ways to deal with it. It talked about how to what's called abatement and remediation. So they talked about if a house had mold in it, that you would have to take the mold out. Actually, first you'd have to make sure that it was mold. Once you knew it was mold, you'd have to remove it. And any of the rocks or anything in the house that were covered with mold, you were to remove them and re-plaster, take care of the walls. And then if it ever came back, they had a second plan of what to do, and it was to destroy the house. That's kind of a rough thing. But the point is that biblically, God thought it important enough to share with Moses and all these messages in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He told how to specifically deal with mold. Now, what does the research actually show? So I want to dive into some research on this issue. And they did a retrospective study. It was conducted on people that had been historically exposed to mold. And they found that these individuals suffered from problems ranging from fungal sinusitis, this, nasal issues, also abnormalities to white blood cells like B and T cells. They had cognitive problems and chronic fatigue and low thyroid. Now, it's interesting that we will probably never have interventional trials for mold, meaning like this. We will probably never say, okay, let's get a bunch of people in the room and we'll have people sniff mold and another group will sniff placebo and see the different interactions. The reason why we'll never have a study like that, I mean, they might do it in some country that doesn't have ethics, but in Western countries, they wouldn't allow that because we know there'd be negative side effects. So all we can do is do what are called retrospective studies, looking at people that have been exposed to it and finding out what has happened to them. So like we said, nasal problems, potentially memory problems, chronic fatigue. Many times people are tired all the time. And sometimes it is nutritional. They're not eating well, they're lacking nutrition, or maybe they're allergic to a food, but it also can be mold. Mold can be one of the primary causes of many people's fatigue issues, chronic fatigue and these kind of things, or like I said, thyroid issues also. They did a study on children in Poland that were 6 years old and that had endured at least 2 years of mold exposure, and they saw a significant drop in their IQ. They had a 10-point drop in their IQ on average from being exposed to mold. So this is something that is potentially very dangerous to physical and mental health. And the American Journal of Public Health, there's a study conducted in this journal looking at people in 8 different cities, and it found that individuals who had dampness or mold in their home were significantly more likely to struggle with depression. Now, I don't want you to think that I believe that all depression comes from mold. It's one of the potential causative factors. It doesn't mean that it's that it's the cause of all depression, but it is something that if you have mold in your house,
no problem.
If you have that in your house, that's something that you might want to remedy to at least lessen your chance and make it more likely that you're going to be able to overcome your depression. And it says, looking at, okay, researchers have done something called a volumetric MRI scan. And what they did was they were looking at people's brains, and specifically at those who had been exposed to water damaged buildings compared to people without water damaged building exposure. And the study revealed that those with the water damaged building exposure had structural differences in their brains.
Wow.
These include the left amygdala and the right forebrain. Now, the left amygdala, the amygdala in general is one of the two main fear centers in the brain, the amygdala, and then there's one in our brain stem also. But the primary one people think of when they think of fear is the amygdala. When you see something and you're scared, it's mainly taking place, that fear center is in the amygdala. And they also had systemic inflammation and evidently had increased blood-brain barrier permeability, meaning it was easier for toxins to be able to enter into the brain when you had been exposed to mold. And these are some of the physiological abnormalities that may be connected to what researchers call the mold-related disorder, CIRS, which stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Now, to give you an idea of some of the potential symptoms that people have, when people have mold exposure, I was just talking to a man on the phone today. A man called me and he had exposure to mold. And he says when he's in a moldy house, he says typically within 10 minutes he has a headache. And about 90% of people who had been severely exposed to mold will end up having headache issues. Once again, it's not the only cause of any of these issues. This is just one of the potential causes of these. And memory problems, over 90% of people that have been significantly exposed to mold, if they've had for a time period, they can notice memory deficits. They struggle with focus and concentration, word selection, meaning they'll struggle to find that, what was that word? What was that word? Also decreased assimilation, confusion, disorientation, numbness, tingling, vertigo, metallic taste, and even tremor. These are some of the things that people can suffer with as a result of mold. And now the part of the brain that we mentioned, the amygdala, when researchers have done scans on people with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And what they found is that in general, people with PTSD have physically larger amygdalas than your average person that doesn't have post-traumatic stress disorder. And remember, people exposed to mold also have larger amygdalas on average. So having mold might make it so that you are significantly more stressed or anxious, or you're having repetitive negative memories because you're in a moldy environment and it's causing inflammation to certain parts of your brain. So that's something.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bigger issue than many people realize. Another issue, and this is, so I have noticed, I'll just give you a personal testimony real quick. The first time I ever noticed a problem in my own life from mold was I was speaking. My wife and I have been traveling for the last 24 years, speaking around the world. And we were in Michigan and we were staying at somebody's house and we stayed in their basement, and their basement was musty. And each night I would do a seminar, probably, I think it was 5 nights a week. And typically when I do a seminar, you meet the people, you shake their hands, you greet them as they're leaving or before. And then the next night, because they're new, you might forget some names, but you always remember the people you just talked with the night before. You at least know their face, right? Each night, I could not remember. It was as if I had never met these people before. And this was scary for me. I was thinking, what on earth is going on? I can't even remember people that I met yesterday. And this was quite scary for me. We ended up getting out of there. And after a while, my mind started doing better after we left there. But another thing that I get memory deficits, but I also get arthralgia, which is basically just joint pain, where the pain in the joints, my knees will hurt. Most of the time, I don't have these issues. Most of the time, I have tons of energy. I love to run. I love to exercise, do pull-ups and push-ups and all of these things. But when I am exposed to mold, I end up having the joint pain. I get tired. I just feel sluggish, and I just simply don't feel good. And many people have these issues. And once again, mold's not the only cause of all these issues. But if you have some of these issues, you might want to ask yourself, do I have dampness in my house? Do I have mold in my house? And fixing that might be at least one of the beginnings to finding these issues. Once again, dietary issues and other things can also affect these. But yeah, these are some of the experiences I've had. And for me, it takes about 2 weeks to a month of being away from it to start feeling, probably at least a month to feel optimal again. So that's the difficulty in travel if you run into it. And during COVID, a lot of hotels just kind of, because people weren't going to the hotel, they would shut down, turn off the heat, turn off the air conditioning. And even a lot of the hotels across the country became musty as a result of it. We noticed that afterward. One of the other things that's fascinating, there's something called natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are a part of your innate immune system. And so when you breathe in some toxins, or even if you, researchers suggest that the average human produces about 2 to 5 cancer cells a day. It's just common. We have, genetic abnormalities. A cell will go rogue. It will become a cancer cell, 2 to 5 of them a day in a normal human. And we have been given in our immune system something called natural killer cells. And they do just what they say. They attack pathogens in the body. No, not only cancer cells, but also cancer cells. And researchers have found that those who have higher levels of natural killer cell activity have, on average, lower levels of cancer. So when your natural killer cells are more active, you're more likely to have less cancer. Well, it turns out that researchers have discovered that people who are in houses that are exposed to mold or dampness, or even workplaces or schools that are damp, that they end up having significantly lower natural killer cell activity. And so as a result of it, it doesn't seem that most of the time the mold itself creates the cancer. That doesn't seem to be what the research shows. But it could be that if your body isn't functioning the way it was designed to function, if your immune system isn't able to fight as well, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to kill off those cells that naturally occur in your body, because we live in this broken world. And so we want to have an immune system that's functioning at optimal capacity. And in order to have that, we do not want to be having mold or mildew in our houses. This is something very important to consider. And there's a verse in Psalms 7, chapter 7, verse 10, and it says, "My defense is of God, which saves the upright in heart." Now, that verse is not talking about our immune system or our defense system. It says that God is our defense, but God has given us in our bodies a defensive system to take care of pathogens that come our way. And one of the ways to make sure that our body's fighting well is to have healthy air in the house. So if you can't right away clear up mold, if you don't, you can't do the abatement and the remediation or cleaning it up and getting rid of it and fixing the problem. One of the things you can do is opening windows as much as possible, let it air out. We're going to get back to some remedies that you can do for mold specifically in just one moment. But I mentioned also that it can potentially cause low thyroid or having fatigue. And it can also lower levels of human growth hormone. I could go on and on. Chronic rhinosinusitis. I grew up, and Scott knows, we actually grew up in, a few blocks from each other, and he'd come over to our house. Well, I didn't realize as a young person, but we had a musty basement, and I always had sinusitis, always. The first, I would say, at least 19 years of my life, I don't ever remember breathing out of both nostrils, except if I were using nasal spray. That was the only time I would ever actually have that. And so 94% of people with chronic mold exposure will have chronic rhinosinusitis, which is the sinus issues, stuffiness, nasal, congestion, and maybe drippy nose and those kinds of things. It's also a factor in asthma, as you can imagine, as you're breathing it into your lungs, it's causing trouble to the lungs and so forth. And going forward, other potential signs are it can actually cause tics, or tremors, vertigo, these kind of things. Well, Okay, that's all the bad news. I'm just giving you.
Yeah. By the way, Chad, let me just jump in here because you sent me a text message a while back when our family went through round 2 of mold remediation, and you were empathizing, and you've talked to so many people who struggle with mold, and you yourself have been through this. And I remember your text. It was simply, and by the way, folks, Chad is not prone to hyperbole. He's factual. He's careful with his language. He just goes, "I hate mold." I'm like, I get it. I see why. It's like the devil is behind this. It's wreaking so much havoc. And so many people are doing so many of the right things. They're doing the 8 laws of health, and then they're still struggling here or here, and they haven't considered the mold. That's why I'm so glad you're taking us through this. Keep going.
Yes, and once again, because often what people can do is they can hyper focus on one issue. Maybe, oh, I got the mold out of my house and I'm still tired or whatever. So once again, I know I've said this is my 3rd time now. There are different factors, and one other issue with mold is it hits 25% of the population significantly more, seemingly because of a genetic aspect, meaning there's about 75% of people that will not notice to the same degree as someone like myself. So some of you can, I've traveled the world and I've stayed in, some countries are kind of chronically moldy, and they don't heat well in the winter. So it's cold and damp. And as a result, almost everywhere is moldy. And roughly 75% of people, they will hardly notice. It is negatively impacting their body, but they won't maybe have the arthritic pain or the headaches all the time, or their memory may not be as bad because of it. But it's a negative impact on everybody. But once again, those who don't have the serious side effects, this is why often doctors will just think, it's just in your head. It's this psychosomatic, you think, and so your body's just expressing this. And I have found that most of the time, there are certain people. I had a great-grandmother who was a hypochondriac. She'd have surgery for diseases she did not have. And there's doctors out there that will do surgeries even though they know, but just because you want it. And that was great-grandma. So I know those things are real. That can happen. But it is often the case that somebody else doesn't feel it. And so one person in the family may feel terrible and the other's like, I don't see the issue. So just because you don't feel something doesn't mean it isn't real for somebody else. So like I said, 25% of people are hypersensitive to it. And now, what do we do about this? I'm going to read to you very quickly from the book of Leviticus. Now, I don't normally read from the New Living Translation, but I'm going to just because it makes it very simple in this particular case. Normally I'd read from the King James, but it uses more complex wording. So here it talks about areas with mold or mildew. And this is what it says: order that the stones from the areas be removed. The contaminated material will then be taken outside the town. Next, the inside walls of the entire house must be scraped thoroughly, and the scrapings dumped in the unclean place outside of the town. Other stones will be brought to replace the ones that were removed, and the walls will be replastered. Now, in modern terminology, we would call this abatement and remediation. You're taking out the offending substance, the moldy rocks or whatever it is, or it could be wood. You take that out. And then remediation is, why is it wet? Oh, is there a leak in the roof? Is there a leak in the window? Typically something like that has happened. Or maybe you have a leaky faucet that you don't know about, or a toilet is leaking. It's leaking into the floor. A family that I know here in Ohio, they had the same thing. They had a chronic leak, didn't know it. They had just thick mold under their house. The family was getting sick. They didn't realize it until, probably might have been months or probably years that it slowly was building up inside of there. And the Bible actually gave us this idea of how to deal with it thousands of years ago. So what are some things we can do natural remedy wise to it once you've cleaned it out? Now, the most important thing with mold is not natural remedies, meaning natural remedies are to help cleanse your body after your house is cleansed in that situation, meaning because it would be kind of like if you were, let's say you took some poison and you call poison control, and sometimes they may have you take charcoal. You go to the hospital and they pump charcoal in, or you can take charcoal. But what if you're taking the charcoal and then you take more of the poison and put it in your body? Well, then you can take more charcoal. So we don't want to be doing that. We want to be getting rid of the toxins. So the first thing, and the difficulty with mold in the house is it's expensive to deal with.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
and Chad, in some cases, you remove your family from it. If it's a moldy place, can you find shelter and some people that can house you temporarily while you get that taken care of? But yeah, it is. I know it is expensive. We've been through
yes,
this twice now.
and that's why I even, I feel sad to a degree talking about it, because many times the houses that are the worst hit are with people that don't have enough money to really deal with it as well. And
Yeah.
so, just like Scott said, you're exactly right. Do you have a family member that could take you in a while it's being dealt with? Some way, somehow, if it's summer and you live in a nice area, I honestly, if it had to be dealt with, if it took several weeks, I'd be willing. I mean, I live out in the country, but I'd sleep in a tent. Do whatever you can do to get away with it until it can be remedied. Because these remedies are good for your body, but if you keep the offending, substances coming in, you're still going to have trouble. But the first one I want to look at, probably many people who are very keen on natural remedies, this is one of the most common natural remedies for cleansing, and it's activated charcoal. And they have done research. This is not just like, oh, yeah, it's a good idea. No, many people who knew about it, they may just try that. But researchers have actually tested activated charcoal. And I want to clarify, activated charcoal is not charcoal briquettes that you might buy for your grill outside of your house, right? Don't go taking those internally.
That's the first thing I thought of when I heard somebody was taking charcoal. It was 24 years ago, about the time that you got into ministry. And there was these, natural health minded people. They were putting on evangelistic series, and one of them was sick. And oh, my wife's taking charcoal, and I thought, what in the world is that? But no, this is well known. In fact, yeah, tell us the difference.
Yeah, so I mean, the little briquettes you're going to get from the store, they're also probably going to have some chemicals in them to help them light on fire and so forth. And you don't want to be taking that internally. Activated charcoal is specifically burned with a low oxygen level, and what it does is it just leaves pure carbon. And that carbon, basically, it's basically like a brick of charcoal, and they pulverize it till it becomes dust. And you can take it the two main ways. You could either take it in a pill form, or you could take it, which I find in general to be the way that you can get more rapidly and even better, is just taking a couple tablespoons of this activated charcoal, solid black substance, dump them in a cup, maybe 8 ounces of water, stir it up, and just drink it down. Your mouth will turn black, your teeth and your tongue will turn black. Immediately, your bad breath will be gone. Immediately. It's amazing what it does, because it does something called adsorption, not absorption, not sucking in, but it adsorbs. It actually clings to the substances, the toxins, and then it holds on to them until basically you let them out of your stool. And so they've done research specifically on activated charcoal's ability to what they call sequester the mycotoxins. By the way, mycotoxins are the toxins that are caused by mold. So mold causes a toxin to come out of them called mycotoxins. And charcoal, they concluded that activated charcoal is evidently what they call a multi-mycotoxin sequestering agent. So because there's different kinds of mycotoxins, different kinds of mold, and multiple of them can be sequestered. They can be grabbed hold of inside of your body as you consume the charcoal. They grab hold of it and they help excrete it in your stool or in your feces. And they did another study where they tested 14 different substances to see their capacity to absorb certain mold toxins. And the only one of the 14 that was truly successful was activated charcoal. And they found that it was, so there's one of the common drugs, I'm not promoting the drug, I'm just telling you about it. One of the most common drug medications that is used for sequestering mycotoxins in the body, mold in the body, for cleansing the body, is something called cholestyramine. And if I remember correctly, I'm not a doctor, but I think it's also like a statin medication, if I remember correctly, but it's also a mold sequestering agent. And they compared what they took activated charcoal and the medication cholestyramine, and they were equally successful at eliminating 90% of the toxins.
That's awesome.
Toxins. So once again,
so you don't need the drug.
That's exactly it.
Use the charcoal. In fact, Chad, tell folks about your seminar on natural remedies, where you take head to head herbal remedies and other natural remedies versus the pharmaceutical concoctions, and you show time and time again the benefits with fewer side effects. And we haven't even mentioned your YouTube channel, Health and Homestead. You can find Chad on YouTube at Health and Homestead. And then what is that? How do people watch that seminar on the natural remedies?
You can check out our website, anchorpointfilms.com, anchor like a boat, point, P-O-I-N-T, films.com. And so you can find our series on natural remedies. And that's exactly it. I have this belief system that the antidotes are found in nature, that God has actually put in the world around us. And so what I've done is I've looked at studies, and I wanted to know, are there studies where they compared head to head in the scientific literature? We're not talking about in John's blog post or this or that. I go right to the scientific literature in the peer-reviewed scientific studies, and some of the major journals, like the Journal of the American Medical Association, they look, it's fascinating because it's not in the textbooks that the doctors will read about when they go to school, but it is in the same scientific journals that they read, that they trust. It's in there, but it never makes it to the hospital. For what,
Right.
guess what reason that might be? Some reason it's never makes it there in general. But in reality, people are finding these things. And so we have a series called, you think I would remember? There we go. Mold, right?
Yeah.
Basically,
I'll look it up right now, Chad.
Yeah, it's on natural remedies, scientific herbs and natural remedies. That's it. Scientific herbs and natural remedies. That's the name of the series.
Yeah,
and
it's the first thing that comes up at anchorpointfilms.com.
Yes.
The Science of Herbs and Natural Remedies
There it is.
on DVD.
Yes. So, and
and streaming. You can stream it too.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And I think I got to update the streaming site, but regardless right now. So charcoal is probably number one. The second thing you can do, the second natural remedy, is a biblical natural remedy. You may remember that Jesus used a natural remedy one time for a blind man. What was that, Scott?
That was mud.
Yes, he picked some out of the ground, some texts call it clay, but he used basically the dust of the ground, something like clay. And they've done research specifically on a certain kind of clay that you can buy on Amazon. It's called sodium montmorillonite. And they have tested it specifically. And this is a pretty fascinating study, because a lot of times natural remedies, you don't have large scale studies. You'll have 20 people, 30 people, 50 people. That's a decent sized natural remedy study, maybe 100. But this study, they have 600 people, which is a pretty good size for a standard natural remedy. And they looked at sodium montmorillonite clay's ability to lower, there's a certain mold called aflatoxin. And this one, I'll bet you've tasted it. Scott, have you ever tasted like a rotten peanut?
I don't think I have.
No, you haven't.
I don't want to.
Okay. No,
don't tempt me.
Well, I'll tell you, I have bitten in, and there's just like this sour, nasty. One of the things that you can get from grains or nuts, if they mold, at least specifically, I know technically a peanut is not a nut. I understand that, but you can get from grains and things like peanuts, you can get a mold sometimes, and it doesn't mean it's on all kinds, but it's called aflatoxin, and it is a carcinogen. So it's a cancer-causing substance. And they did a study on sodium montmorillonite clay's ability to lower aflatoxin. That's on 600 people, and they used either 1.5 or 3 grams of the clay, or a placebo. So this is a placebo-controlled study. And it turns out that either dose, 1.5 grams or 2 grams of this clay, successfully lowered aflatoxin levels compared to placebo. So that's another thing. And then people think, well, if it's sequestering things like mold, might it be lowering levels of vitamins and minerals in the body? Well, when they looked at it, in general, they found that it was not lowering minerals or vitamins like vitamin A, also things like iron and zinc. So it seems to be something that is not going to, take away healthy things from your body, but the clay may have the ability to grab hold of and get rid of things that your body doesn't need or things that may be detrimental to your body. And
that's a sign of the creator right there, if I can just jump in. I
yeah.
mean, how did God make it so? Well, how did it just happen accidentally? God made it that the clay and the charcoal both do good things for you, but not bad things for you. They take away the bad, they don't take away the good from you. Is this
Now,
clay you're speaking of? Is this related to bentonite clay? That's what we're
no,
taking.
I think sodium montmorillonite clay is different.
Okay.
I think bentonite clay is another version of clay, and people do take also bentonite clay. You're right, and there are beneficial aspects to bentonite clay also. And it may be that bentonite clay is just as good. I don't know, but the only research I found is on this sodium montmorillonite, so I can't.
Okay.
I can't say for sure.
We're gonna throw that into the mix because it's proven for sure.
Yes.
We're doing the charcoal and that, and I don't know if you're gonna mention something else too. I won't steal your thunder, but keep going.
No. There is one other one which is quite simple and it's very natural. Once again, is chlorophyll, and you probably know chlorophyll it's the component in plants that helps give green plants their nice dark rich color. Something like kale or various things. Now, spinach would have it also, but you want to be careful with too much spinach. I mean, spinach, a little spinach here and there is fine, but you get too much of it and you can get too much of the oxalates. It's massively high. That could cause kidney stones if you overdo something like spinach. But you don't have very much of it in something like kale. And so kale, or you could just eat a lot of salad, but a way to get much more chlorophyll would be to juice. And so if you use the juicer and we're talking, I'm not saying everybody needs to juice all the time, but for those who maybe have been exposed to mold or they've got some health issues, it might be well for them for a time to try some green juice to really expel some of those toxins. And they have found specifically that chlorophyll is beneficial to that. Many people, though, often instead of using the plants like kale and so forth, they end up using marine-based chlorophyll. But the danger with the marine-based, the water-based chlorophyll is that it often is contaminated. And so it's probably better to use the vegetables that are not in the water, specifically when you're trying to avoid that. So now, how often should you take these things? Once again, I've already told you how much of the charcoal. Charcoal might be a couple tablespoons in water, and the 1.5 to 3 grams of the montmorillonite clay. And the juicing, they don't give an exact number of how much necessarily of the chlorophyll, but you can juice here and there. But it's suggested in one of these studies or this review going over the mechanisms of mold and so forth, they suggest to take these things 2 to 4 times a day without other medications or supplements. And they say to talk with your medical professional, which we always have to say. And so, but if you're on, but I do have to say one thing, that charcoal can also make it so that your drug medications don't work as well. So if you're on drugs and you're using the drugs, you have to be careful and talk to your doctor whether you can take charcoal. So for a normal person, it's going to be beneficial. You don't want to overdo charcoal either, because for some people are prone to constipation. Too much charcoal could cause constipation. I don't have that problem, so it's not an issue for me. But if you struggle with that, don't overdo the charcoal. Another thing to consider for cleansing the body is sauna. There's some preliminary research on saunas, detoxifying the body of mold. Outdoor air is important. Obviously, open the air to or open the windows so you get fresh air in your house. Honestly, all year long, wherever I am, my wife and I, we live in Michigan, and we're moving to Ohio at this point, but we live in Michigan, and even in the winter, we keep our bedroom window, not the whole house windows open at night, but our window open to get fresh air. And doing that can be very beneficial on so many levels. We don't have time to go into all that right now. I'm not going to go into it right now, but there's also research on potentially, you don't want to have a lot of decaying plant matter around your house, like a big compost pile outside the house or big clumps of grass that are rotting and so forth. There's research that it may be increasing rates of Lou Gehrig's disease, or it's called ALS is the other name for Lou Gehrig's disease. And also, they're saying that they're seeing higher levels of Lou Gehrig's disease in areas with specifically that have wells. And I have a well, and I like having a well. So they suggest if you have well water, it would be well to filter, no pun intended, it would be well to filter your water if you have well water. So I think that's about it when it comes to this. Let me. It's interesting. If you don't mind, I'll share this very quickly.
Yeah, please.
This in the Bible, there was back in the Old Testament where we talked about in the Old Testament, it talked about how to cleanse the house, but the priest would have to come. And then when it died, now this is, or when it was cleansed, they had to do a special sacrifice. And this will sound, harsh to people, but they would take two birds and they would take one of them and they would have running water come over the birds and over this bird, and one of the birds would have to die, and the blood and the water would go on the other bird, and they would have cedar, scarlet, and hyssop. They would get these things with the blood and with the water, and then this would end up, they would put it on the living bird, and the living bird they would let go free. And you think, wow, that's horrible, making an animal die. Well, most people eat meat, so they probably don't care too much about animals dying, obviously. But anyway, in the Bible times, this was a sacrifice symbolizing that Jesus would come and die. And it's interesting, all of these figures, one dying, and when it died, there was water and there was blood. When Jesus died on the cross, his side was pierced, and out came two things, blood and water. And in this, they would also take this blood and water, and they would have cedar wood there. And some of the ancient Christians said that Jesus died on a cedar wood cross. Whether it was cedar wood or not, I don't know, but a connection there with the cross. This whole ceremony that was about the cleansing of the house, it had the cross. You have scarlet. Jesus, they put a scarlet robe on him and mocked him for being a king, they said. And hyssop also, you may remember, they took hyssop and they put the vinegar on it and they put it up to Jesus' lips. All of the pictures there in this was a part of that one would die to set the others free, and the house would have to be cleansed. And somehow this even had to do with the cleansing of a house. The Bible tells us that we are a temple of God and that God wants to cleanse us. Jesus came to die for our sins so that we could be cleansed. But in order for us to be set free eternally, someone ended up having to die, and Jesus died for us. And that was even connected to the cleansing of the houses in the Old Testament. And if at all possible, hopefully we all can find a way to have clean houses ourselves. And if they're not clean with mold, that we can hopefully pray about it, and God can show us a way to have them remediated, that we can have them, the abatement, taking out the toxins, and that we can have healing in our lives.
Amen. Thank you for drawing the spiritual out there, Chad, because that's really the heart and soul of what LSR is about, what you are about, what I am about, and is what Jesus is about in this world, about bringing hope, healing, and eternal life to every soul, every child of God who he created in his image and who he died for to save and bring to heaven. I am moving back. My family and I are moving back into our house where we've been putting it back together. We tore all the carpets out. We're putting the flooring in. We're getting it all ready. And tomorrow and Friday is move back in. And we're not going to do the Old Testament sacrifices, but we will remember Jesus' sacrifice as, I think, a special gratitude offering is appropriate when we have encountered any of our listeners who've encountered the healing message of God, and you've found positive changes in your life by making decisions to follow his way or listening to the advice of those who've been through it or who have some medical wisdom, and you go, wow, this has changed my life. Be sure to give glory to the Creator and be sure to pay that forward in service to others, remembering what Jesus did for us. So thank you, Chad, for that devotional in the midst of a lot of practical, very helpful information. Folks, did you appreciate the mold information? I mean, this is a bigger issue, I think, than many people realize. And so get those things, the charcoal, the clay, the greens, and get busy cleansing. Also, get out of the place where there's mold. Don't be around mold. It is toxic. It is dangerous. It doesn't look that big of a deal. Actually, it kind of does now that I realize what it is. Like, it's dark and black and ominous. It's like, But to most people, it's like, oh, no big deal. Some of us guys might be like, come on, I can handle it. But no, this stuff is deadly. It's like you heard about cancer rates rising, depression, and all these terrible things. So I do want to recommend. Oh no, I want to ask a question. One more question of Chad, and then Jeremy, load up the questions. We'll go to the Q&A on natural remedies, folks, on any topic. Chad, and if he doesn't know, he'll tell you he doesn't know, but he likes to have the grab bag experience. But my question for you was, how long do you do this? 4 times a day, trying to take these things. Your charcoal, your greens, your clay, toggling those probably throughout the day, trying to get a 3 or 4 touches per day, if possible, of those every day for how many weeks? I mean, and assuming you're mold free, you're not around the mold anymore, the mold is gone. But how long do you do that for to really get your body fully cleansed before you can stop?
You could maybe try with something like the charcoal, no more than a couple weeks. I would not be doing charcoal, and I would be careful. I wouldn't do the charcoal 4 times a day. I would mix and match these 3 different things, or 4 different things if you also consider something like a sauna. And you can't always do a sauna. You could exercise to get sweating and these kind of things, or you could do a hot bath. Or a hot cold shower. So there's other things you can do, but I would mix and match maybe 3-4 times a day, not 4 times a day of charcoal. I'm guessing a lot of people would get serious constipation with that. So you could maybe do the greens once a day or twice a day, maybe, and then you could do the other one, the other two times of the day. And I wouldn't do charcoal for any more than probably 2 weeks and then take a break from that. It's not, you don't need to be doing something like charcoal all the time. Sooner or later, your body should be cleaned out and you should be good to go after that. To make sure that you don't get the constipation, eating a lot of high fiber foods like sweet potatoes, one of the best ways to avoid or reverse constipation. Sweet potatoes are just packed with fiber, and that fiber bulks up the stool and makes it push right out so that you don't have to strain at tiny little things in the bathroom. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, so that's helpful. And you could go with the greens for more than 2 weeks. But
yes. Oh, yes. And I was going to say that.
Yeah.
It was in my head, and then I got off on sweet potatoes. So
well, no,
I would go
Chad,
on.
I know you can get off on sweet potatoes. In fact, folks, when you ask questions, he's gonna have an answer, and sweet potatoes are gonna work their way into every answer. But you got a video, LSR viewers, coming, a Scott Ritsema video on sweet potatoes, and that's the guy you can blame for getting me excited about sweet potatoes. Jeremy, let's take some questions. Who do we have here? We'll say hi to folks. Joe says, I was diagnosed with macular degeneration about 5 years ago. I found some medication online and have been taking it for 5 years now, but it's no longer available. Can castor oil harm cataract implants? And maybe you want to address that question specifically, and macular degeneration in general.
Yeah, I do not know enough to answer that one. So I'm just going to be honest. I wish I did. That is something I need to do some research on macular degeneration so that in the future I will have a better answer. Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. Jeremy, who else do we have coming up? We've got Christina. Welcome and hello back to you, Christina. You were the one that asked the question about how to find the RevidaGuard on the LSR store website. In the chat, I put the link in there in answer to your question, Christina. So just a heads up on that, so you can find the Revita Living products there at the LSR store, and they carry the charcoal as well in that store. That was the activated charcoal that Chad was talking about. You can get that there as well. Oh, there was a question there. Is there? I missed it. It was Christina again, so I didn't notice it was a new one. Is there anything you can spray? Well, yeah, the Revita Sinus. I think she was asking about the products, but Chad, what do you do for nasal?
Yes, and on top of something like that, specifically, there's something called, I have a video on my YouTube channel. It's not my newest video, but it's a couple videos back on the neti pot. And I know it's kind of a funny sounding thing, but if that is another thing, if you're exposed, so some people may find that you're out doing chainsaw work or you're mowing your lawn, and as you're doing that, you're kicking up a lot of mildew and dust and these kind of things. Or even if you just went to somebody's house and they do have a mildewy or moldy house, what you can do is you can get one of these neti pots. You can buy, I actually suggest these ceramic ones. Basically, they're 10, 12, 20, no more than $20 on Amazon, and buying one that is microwavable. And the reason I say that is the microwavableness is to cleanse it. Basically, what they found is that you use it. What you do is you take a pot. If I should have had it here, I could have showed you. But basically, you take this little pot and it has a little spout coming off. You fill it up with water and salt, and typically about a half teaspoon of salt per container. You can use iodized salt. You can use sea salt. And research shows both of them working. They actually show a slight greater benefit to the iodized salt, which makes sense because iodine is also a cleansing substance. So what you do is you put it in there, you put it at maybe 8 ounces of water, you stir it up, and you stick the one end of it in your nose, and you tip your head to the side, and it goes up into the sinuses. It cleanses the sinuses, then it comes out your other nostril. And my wife doesn't like it. She says, I feel like I'm being waterboarded.
Oh, that's exactly my joke, Chad.
Yes.
My wife loves doing the neti pot. I've never done it. I refuse to do it because I have a moral objection to waterboarding. You know, I stood against these human rights violations during the War on Terror, and my wife will never get me to do a neti pot. I'm a Revita sinus purist, but folks, I don't want to deter you from doing it because so many people have found benefits from it. Apparently, it works. I'm just a wimp.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen my video, and I'm not just marketing the video, I go through the scientific research on that. This is crazy. They did a study in December of 2020. So COVID is just, peaking. I mean, obviously it took off earlier in 2020. Yeah, 2019 technically, but it was taking off more in the United States in 2020. And then it's really taking off by December. And they did a study on neti pots using, they call it nasal saline irrigation. The saline is just salt water. And what they found is that at that time, I forget, I have the chart, basically about like 7% of people were going to the hospital. That's what they said in the study anyway, in 2020. And I forget the exact number, but it was like, 1.5% of people were dying from it. And so then they had people within 24 hours of having a positive COVID test, they were given a neti pot, and it dropped the levels of having to go to the hospital by like 8.5 times. And nobody died that used the neti pot.
Nobody died suddenly from the neti pot, did they?
Nobody died from the neti pot either. And so meaning, now, if it would have been a larger study, I'm sure somebody who used the neti pot would still die. But the whole point is it was unbelievably successful. This was so amazing. But the study was done in 2020, December. And so it got published in June of 2024. So after the whole thing.
It wouldn't, they wouldn't publish it earlier.
I don't know. I haven't talked to the researchers, but I'm guessing if they would have come out with it earlier, the medical professionals would have said, these people are quacks. They're ridiculous. It's not a big enough study. And sure, it's not a big enough study to know for sure. But here's the thing. What if it did work? The thing's like $10. It has almost no side effects. Oh, quick. I do need to there is a side effect. If you either use distilled water, or you can use tap water, but you have to boil it for 5 minutes. You have to get it up to a boil and let it, once it hits boiling, once you see the bubbles coming up, 5 minutes of that. And because if you don't, you could actually hurt yourself. You could have an amoeba in your water and you could do damage to yourself. But if it's boiled, you'll be safe. So there's virtually no side effects other than, maybe it is a little uncomfortable for some. I don't have a problem with it. I actually don't mind it at all. I mean, yes, for about a half a second when it first goes in, it's slightly uncomfortable. But once it starts rolling through, I feel good.
Yeah. I'm sure once you get used to it, it's fine. It's kind of like the contrast showers, like ending my shower with cold, which I do every time. I never end a shower unless it's with cold. And the first time I did it, I was like, this is the greatest form of torture ever. And now I actually like it. It's invigorating. I realize I'm going to be warmer after the shower since I ended it with cold water than if I didn't end it with cold water. So it's 30 seconds of, heavy, kind of frantic. But afterwards, like, you feel better. So I'll take that 30 seconds trade off for feeling great for the next few minutes. So you're drying off and getting dressed stuff. But let's say hi to some more folks. There's our Luna. Thank you for the peace and blessings, my friend. And Shauna Wang from Tucson, Arizona. Welcome. And Jamaica, Cynthia's watching us from Jamaica. Welcome, Cynthia. Here we've got June saying shalom and blessings from England/UK. Welcome. Is it true that instant coffee, Chad, and tea bags contain mold? You mentioned peanuts. I heard also cashews can. Is that true? I'm going to throw that in with Massa's question, but there can be sometimes mold in the food and food products, tea bags, coffee.
Probably almost any plant, because what you need is a biological substance for mold to attach to. So depending on how they dried or dehydrated the whatever's gone into the tea bag, there is theoretically a possibility. Probably if you're getting it from a reputable source, it probably shouldn't be super bad, but I can't say. I mean, the reality is all air has mold in it, and probably all food has mold in it. Meaning it's ubiquitous in this world, but it's when it's in higher concentrations, like a moldy house, then it becomes a serious problem. Very, very small amounts in food, it's going to naturally be there no matter what. But so we don't have to be terrified of everything. But it's more when it's overdone. So if we don't have any health issues and you're probably fine. I mean, there are in certain teas, you can find all kinds of toxins. They can have lead or arsenic or whatever. But you can have those almost anywhere too. So I just don't want you to be afraid of everything on planet Earth. But
yeah, but I mean, if you see physical mold in the lid of the spaghetti, or I've heard even, would you recommend that, you have your bag of oranges at the back of the drawer, you forgot it was there for weeks and there's some mold there. Do you put like a mask on to get that mold out of there? I mean, I don't, but I just heard somebody recommend that. I'm like, that's maybe not a bad idea. I hold my breath. Like I get it and I walk it outside and hold my breath the whole time.
I probably do the hold the breath thing, but it wouldn't hurt, honestly. Yeah. And once again, it all depends. If you know somebody in your house is more affected by it, meaning like John in the house is the one who suffers the worst. Maybe somebody else.
Yeah, we've got one of those in my
somebody
family.
else could do it then if you have somebody who really suffers. Yeah. So, but I mean, technically, yeah, it would probably be good to have. I do have a mold mask at home. It has the two red, I don't know what you call them, like cushions on the front. It is a mold respirator. They're not terribly expensive if you need them. If you're working, I now sadly, because now I also think there's an issue with mold where it's cumulative, because a lot of people, when they're younger, they don't have arthritis, and later in life, you can get arthritis from allergies. Once again, they're from inflammation, from bad diet, but you can also get arthritis from mold. So, but it often takes place later in life. Our bodies, can weaken over time. So you may think, oh, I'm fine, no big deal. But if you perpetually are in it, it may get worse over time for you. So now, this is terrible, but when I'm doing chainsaw work, I have to use my respirator, especially if it's older dead trees, because it will give me just physical pain throughout my body. If I'm sawing into some moldy wood, it ends up giving me trouble. So everybody's got to make their own decisions on how to use these things. But there are times to even use the respirator. They're not, they're $25, $30 or something. They're not super expensive.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for that question, Massa. And Mike and Melba from Pampa, Texas. Welcome to LSR Live. Thanks for being with us. Massa also asks, is there any connection between mold exposure and multiple sclerosis and asthma?
Great question. I do not know for sure for multiple sclerosis, but the research does show specifically for asthma. That is something that has been shown. Sometimes what is considered multiple sclerosis, we know someone specifically who she came down, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she had been writing a book just before that. She was inside a lot, and it turned out she was actually extremely low in vitamin D. And so it was actually a vitamin D deficiency. And once she became sufficient, they ended up supplementing and getting up on that with the vitamin D. She ended up not having the issues with multiple sclerosis, and it may not have actually been multiple sclerosis anyway. So sometimes, you're being diagnosed and it's not actually the right diagnosis. And I don't want to say that all multiple sclerosis can be healed with vitamin D, but if you think you have it, that's something to consider, your vitamin D levels. But I don't know for sure the mold connection there.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is hello, good morning and blessings to all from New Zealand. So good morning. That feels funny to say here in the late afternoon, but says Smita says, sir, if gut is inflamed, what immediate remedy can you use to pacify the flare?
That's a good question. Now, depending on what is causing it, there are a few different options. So it's a broad question because your stomach could be inflamed for many different reasons. Really spicy food can inflame the intestinal lining. And so, avoiding the spicy food could help lower the inflammation. For others, you may have something like an ulcer. And so you have that. One of the ways you can help with an ulcer is, I have a video on my YouTube channel, Health and Homestead, looking at the research on cabbage juice. Cabbage juice is more effective than the standard medical therapy for ulcers. And I had an ulcer years ago, and it was my fault. It is. I used to be a pharmaceutical guy, and when I don't mean I didn't work in the industry, I used to
I know what you mean.
I used to take ibuprofen, and so because of that, I ended up getting an ulcer. And so what I did to heal it is that was before I knew about the research, but somebody told me about it, and I would make like a quart of cabbage juice every day. And by the way, when you first juice cabbage, it doesn't taste great, but it's not terrible. But I would make enough for 24 hours. And by the last drink that I would do of it, it was disgusting. But it just got really nasty after about. So, but I would have to drink it every 4 hours because the pain of the ulcer would come back. So if you're inflamed because of an ulcer, you might have to drink some every 4 hours, even around the clock. And it doesn't only help with the pain, it actually is healing to the lining of the gut. And so that's another option. Another option is going on a whole food, unrefined diet, or an elimination diet, because you may have inflammation of the gut because you're allergic to a food. You could get rid of some of the most common allergens. You could try avoiding gluten or soy or corn, these kind of things temporarily. And if that doesn't work, they may not be your problem. Certain people will struggle with those things. I do not. But if you're one of those ones who struggle with those, then you could avoid those.
Thank you, Chad, for that. SM says, hello, sir. Good day. I have arthritis in my finger bone. My finger bone is bending. What should I do or eat or refrain from eating?
Good question. Good question. So when it comes, there's a few different things that you could do. You could be getting arthritis. Once again, not everything's from mold, but mold can create the arthritis sometimes. It can cause inflammation. So first question, do you have mold in the house? And if you do, hopefully by God's grace, you could remedy that or move or do whatever you got to do. The other things that can cause it also are inflammation in general. So you could be eating a food that you're allergic to. And so that's going on something like an elimination challenge diet. If somebody's interested in that, I could send you an email, just a free email with a list of basically the most common allergens and food-wise. And what it does is, this is not a diet for everybody. Most people don't need to go on this diet. This is an extreme temporary diet for 1 month where you avoid a bunch of foods, most of which are good. Not all of them are good. Some of them are not healthy foods, but you avoid a bunch of healthy foods, and then for a month. And if your problems go away, like your arthritis or some other gut issue, you get rid of them for a month. And if you're doing well at the end of the month, then you start adding back one at a time the foods that you were avoiding. And you may add back like citrus. For most people, citrus is great, but it's one of the more common allergens when it comes to fruit. And so I love citrus. I have no problem with it, but my wife does actually have an allergy to it. So you avoid these several foods for a month. And then let's say at the end of the month, you're feeling great and you're like, well, I want an orange. Okay, you add it back. And then you wait 3 to 5 days before adding another food back. And if nothing bad happens, then it's probably not the orange. So you can keep eating oranges. And then maybe you add back peanuts. And let's say, oh man, now I got achy joints now, or whatever, or my finger's hurting. It could be that you're allergic to the peanut. I'm not saying it's the peanut, but I'm just giving that as an example. You could go on an elimination challenge diet. If you go to my website, anchorpointfilms.com, anchorpointfilms.com, and hit contact, it will come to me, write an email asking for the diet, and I will send that to you. It's free. So if you have any interest, you could send that.
Great. That's the American spelling of point. P-O-I-N-T.
Yes. No E on the end.
Anna says, oh, wow, just tune in. I'm looking for remedies for fungus in my gut. So fungus, I guess this is related. We've got mycotoxins, we've got fungus, we've got parasites. There's so many things that we could talk about, but tell us a little bit about fungus, Chad.
Well, it depends on what it is. If it means something like candida, if that's what you're referring to, I'm not sure. But one of the most, I mean, we already mentioned it earlier, but one of the best things for dealing with toxins within the gut is the charcoal. Charcoal is one of the best things you can do for that specifically. Another thing you can do, and this is going to fly in the face of what everybody is going to tell you, and if you disagree, I'll love you anyway. I'm not here to argue with anybody, but I have met several people through the years who've gone on what they call the candida diet. And the candida diet, it basically, let me explain what candida is. Candida, when people hear those words, they think of something bad. And it can be potentially bad if you have an overgrowth of candida, but it's actually a natural process within the body. So for instance, if you habitually have high blood sugar, God has put something in your body that can actually help cleanse your body from this issue. And so then you have candida, and you get too much candida because you have too much blood sugar. So candida is not a good thing when you have an overgrowth. It's a sign that there's something else wrong. The candida is not the problem. It's the high blood sugar that's the problem necessarily, or too much sugar within the body. So what people immediately do is they go on a candida diet, and I find very few people do better on a candida diet. And the candida diet is getting rid of almost all carbohydrates like fruits and these kinds of things, and whole grains, and going on a high fat diet. And seldom do I see those people get well. Seldom. Maybe once I saw somebody get well that way, but almost nobody gets well that way that I've run into anyway. I mean, that's just my anecdotal experience. But we actually teach people to do the very opposite. Go on a very high plant food diet, including tons of fruit, which scares people to death. My wife did this. We went on a 2-week fruit diet a number of years ago, and it totally healed my gut. And my wife had candida, and it cured her candida being on a almost exclusively fruit diet, high carbohydrate, low fat diet. Now, I was sharing this, we were speaking in Hawaii, and I shared up front how my wife had did this, and a lady came afterward, and she's like, I struggle with candida. I've been on the candida diet. I can't get rid of it. And she said, what did you do? I said, we literally were on whole unrefined fruit, not fruit juice, no fruit juice, but pure fruit for 2 weeks. And I'm not saying everybody has to do this. I'm not suggesting that. Most people don't need to. But so, and she said, okay, all right. And she contacted us some months later. She's like, I did what you said, and I got rid of my candida. And the reason I could go on for an hour. I won't do it. But long story short, going on these low fat, higher carb, not refined carbs, not sugar, not soda, not candy bars, but fruits, vegetables, whole grains, or temporarily these high unrefined carbs, what happens is your blood sugar actually goes down. You can reverse people's type 2 diabetes by a super high carb, low fat diet. And I know that sounds like heresy to most humans on the internet today, but there's research all over the place on the impact of this. And so help my wife, this lady told us it helped her also. That's something you could consider doing also, if that's what the fungus you're talking. I'm not sure if that's what you mean by fungus in the gut. Otherwise, you could try.
Chad, you do get to go on for an hour on this topic. Right after this interview, Chad and I are doing a double header. So if you want to follow over at Belt of Truth, we do a live program at Belt of Truth on YouTube right after LSR Live, and Chad is my guest over there as well. And we're going to do paleo, keto, carnivore. What is the truth about these trending health trends? So I'll leave it there, but thank you for that. Thank you for kind of blowing our mind and stretching our minds a little bit, challenging us on what our preconceived ideas might be on that topic. June says, good evening. I wake up with sore eyes every day and phlegmy, as well as brain fog. What should I take, please? And maybe there's more than just what do you take too?
Yes, and that's actually what I was thinking, Scott, that I used to wake up that way all the time growing up. And once again, we also had a house with a musty basement. And there is a chance that you're breathing in and even getting it into your eyes, little tiny, toxins as a result of what's going on around you. That's possible. Now, it is also possible you have a dietary problem, and that's an issue also. But consider, do you have mold in your environment? And if you do, because I still will get that if I'm in a moldy house, I'll wake up and my eyes will be a bit puffy, or maybe even some of those we called them sleepers when I was a kid. I've heard people call them eye boogers too, but yeah, those kind of things, and get those around I have that almost never unless I'm in one of these environments or something like that. Now, also dairy is one of the most common allergens when it comes to food. And and by the way, most of the planet is lactose intolerant, except for a small subset of Northern Europeans. Almost every other culture is lactose intolerant, and many Northern Europeans also struggle with it. I'm one. I grew up eating, all kinds of dairy products, and I didn't realize until I got rid of it that they were the source of most of my congestion outside of the mold. Meaning, because even when I get away from mold, if I would take milk, I would immediately become congested. Not everybody's that way, but you may be one of those people. So try getting rid of dairy from the diet. You could wash your face maybe right before bed. That's a possibility. But if there's mold in the environment, it still may come on. Once again, it could, and the whole brain fog thing would fit perfect with mold toxicity in the environment. We can't say for sure because we don't know the environment you're in, or maybe the workplace or the school you're in could be moldy also. So it's hard to say, but those are
Is
some
it
options.
possible to a really old mattress and comforter could be a problem?
Oh yeah, especially some old, if you're not, because a lot of comforters are not washed. I mean, some depending on how, your where you live or your environment or what you have, but you do have a lot of these old quilts and things that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, I don't know your place, but it could be, just years of accumulated small amounts. You may not even see the mold in it, but it just builds up. So yes, that could be an issue. So really washing the things you're sleeping on, or maybe you need a new mattress. Any of those things could be a potential.
Thank you, June, for the question. We'll go on to Dakota. Redmond Clay has both. I think he might mean both in the sense of the bentonite and the one you named that I forgot the name of already. But Dakota is a big fan of the Redmond Clay. I guess maybe that's a brand or something.
All right. Yeah, I don't know anything
Yeah.
about it, but if they got it, wherever you can get. The other one was Montmorillonite clay.
Montmorillonite. All right. Let your light shine. Cool handle. I like that. Hello. I eat a little a day, and it's included a couple of cups of carbs, but I feel bloating all days long. What should I do? Thank you.
Good question. Now, I wish I could know specifically what you mean by a couple cups of carbs, what that means to you, because that could be oatmeal, that could be, I don't know, it could be anything. So sorry, I don't have a more direct answer. You could be bloating from various things. Now, if it's oatmeal, many people do get bloating from oatmeal. I don't mean that many people do phenomenal with it. If that's what you mean by couple cups, I don't know. Some people, you have to really thoroughly cook the oatmeal very, very, very long to actually break down some of the starch, or some people will be bloated. It could be lack of chewing. Some people, if they do not chew enough, will have gas all the time and bloating. So learning to be a massive chewer is one thing that really helped me with bloating. So chewing is a great option. Thorough cooking of anything that has starch in it, you want it to be thoroughly cooked. So grains, whole grains, you want those to be thoroughly cooked, or they could cause you bloating. Otherwise, you could have an allergy to a food that you're eating, and that's where a temporary elimination challenge diet that I mentioned earlier, if you want that, I could send you that email, or if you email me at go to anchorpointfilms.com and hit contact, and I could send you that elimination challenge.
Great. We've got Sharon, and then Jeremy, load up one more. We're going to have to wind down here. Its time has flown by. Sharon says, I read that if you pour your green juices through a nut milk bag, you remove the fiber. I read fiber holds on to pesticides and fertilizers. So is that recommended when you do your juicing, Chad?
That is a great question. I do not know for sure, but yeah, so I can't say for sure that one. I've never looked specifically into it. I think I've heard the same thing, but I've never actually looked into the research. And I'm kind of careful now not to be too dogmatic until I've actually looked into it and not just taking somebody's words. Because in the past, I used to take people's word for all kind of things. Then I'd find out later when I looked into it, it wasn't true. So this may be true. It may not be. I'm not questioning that. I just don't know. So I don't want to specifically
Well, I
say
appreciate your conservative standpoint. So Massa says, is keeping rosemary and lavender plants inside the house, does that purify the air?
Some people do suggest that having plants in the house can help purify the air also. And I haven't seen research per se, but I think there is research that it can have a benefit to mental health having plants in the house. Now, if you see like mold growing on the pot or something like that, be a little careful with it. But if you're doing it in such a way that it doesn't seem to be doing, causing leaking or something like that, make sure you're not causing, leaking out the side of it and causing mold in the house. But if you're doing it, I think there are ways that you can have house plants in a sanitary and healthful way. And we do know that there's some benefits, at least mental or cognitively, for houseplants.
I am a huge houseplant fan, by the way, but I ended up exacerbating our mold problem by turning humidifiers on. I love humid air, and I just wanted it like a greenhouse in there, and I had no idea what I was doing. And it was good for the plants. It was really good for the mold too, which means bad for humans. So I recommend keeping an eye on the humidity in your house, and turn air conditioners on even in the summer when it's high humidity. Even if you don't need the AC, it's good to keep that humidity 55% or below is what the mold remediation guys told me, in order to keep that mold from growing. Ann says, Jeremy, you snuck an extra question, and we're happy to have your question. Here's a tip to avoid constipation with taking charcoal. Add 1 teaspoon of ground psyllium husk powder to the water along with the charcoal. Well, thank you for the tip, Ann.
Great tip. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Chad, man, time has flown by. Folks, subscribe to Chad's YouTube channel, very popular YouTube channel over there, Health and Homestead. And again, you can continue on with us over at Belt of Truth on YouTube as well. We're going to do an interview on diets and on the low carb versus the alternative that Chad was just describing. And Jeremy, who's our guest next week on LSR Live? Oh yeah, Louis Burtis on thyroid health. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday live again, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. I'm very glad we've had this conversation about both mold and many natural remedies in the Q&A. Chad, thanks for being with us. And of course, thanks to our producer, CDN. Great job, Jeremy. From likes to lives changed, scan that QR code and follow CDN on YouTube over there. And we pray God's blessings for each and every one of you, and that you remember that sacrifice of Christ that Chad told us midway through the program, that reminds us of how the Lord cares for you and how Jesus gave his life for you. So as you pray to him and seek him and enjoy the natural remedies he's provided for you, until next time, I'm Scott Ritsema with LSR Live. God bless you all.